Hello, my name is Matt.Maker, Matthew, and today I want to show you a really unique, interesting way to create 3 simple shapes that are going to teach you the basics on how to shape blue foam in any shape and style you want to for more complex designs for the future. But we're going to start here on the basics, which is a cube, a pyramid, and a sphere. What you're going to be creating is this. Okay, a simple layout, cube, pyramid, and sphere, and how to showcase that on a nice flat board so you can understand this for the future. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through step by step on how to create each one of these in their full entirety so you can understand a greater understanding of blue foam as a modeling material and the tools and skills it takes to create these shapes. Alright, welcome to this video. We're going to go through how to create 3 small shapes in blue foam. It's going to be a cube, it's going to be a pyramid, and it's going to be a sphere. Okay, I'm going to go from start to finish with some different angles and views here, so you should be able to understand exactly how the process is going to happen. Okay, first of all, we need to start with our material. We have just a standard dirty blue foam material here. Okay, this is 2 inches thick already. Okay, this is what we want to start with. Our objects are going to be 1 3/4 by 1 3/4 by 1 3/4. Okay, depending on how you measure them. So we want to start with something that's that thickness and material. All right. First things first, I'm going to cut a long strip out of this. I want to make sure that I have enough material to get my 3 objects out of, and also having something to hold on to. Okay, we're going to go through this in a way that we make 3 cubes first, and then we turn 2 of the cubes into the other 2 objects, such as a pyramid and a sphere. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use some tools. I'll explain what tools I'm using and why I'm using them as I do it so that it makes sense. Okay, it's really important to start looking at where can I start off of a raw piece of blue foam so I can understand exactly how to mimic my shapes. Okay, this has a relatively smooth edge. It's been kind of beat up and chewed up, so it's a little bit unperfect, but I'm gonna make it work. Okay, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna rip myself off a 2-inch, roughly a 2-inch strip here. Okay, because I want to surface this edge first and then get my other side, we'll start working on it here. Okay. Just some simple tools I'm going to use. This is a fine line black Sharpie. Essentially, it's not Sharpie brand, but this will give me a nice fine line. All right. We're going to be cautious about our lines because we don't want them to end up in the final product, but we do need to have a precise tool to make lines. Okay. Little square. Okay, this one adjusts. It doesn't necessarily have to be an adjustable square. This is just going to help us maintain a 90-degree angle. Okay, this is going to help us make sure that everything is square and true and beautiful. All right. Saw of some kind. Okay, this is a Japanese back saw. It's got a straight blade, even though it's got a little bit of flex to it. This is going to help me get a nice, straight, true cut to start. Okay, and then it'll help me break down my pieces later. Okay, sandpaper. We'll talk about sandpaper and shaping tools when we get to it. All right. So first things first, I want to pick an edge. All right. This is way more than I need. Okay, I only need about 6 inches of this material. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna kind of break this down into a little bit more usable piece. All right. And since we're not being that picky, I'll just score this. Ah, come on. Yeah. All right. Now we have a little bit more easy thing to work with. Okay, so this blue foam here has got a nice smooth surface. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little sanding tool that I've made. Okay, it's nothing special. It's a piece of 1/8" polystyrene plastic that I've used a peel and stick type sandpaper on. And this is actually 180 grit sandpaper. You could go a more coarse grit, like a 120, but blue foam sand's really nice and easy, so you don't really have to get something super aggressive on it. Okay, it depends on your finish. It depends on what you're after, but you should be able to do a lot with just a 180, 150 grit, and then up to 220 grit. Okay, so I'm going to do is I'm going to dress this surface. Good idea when you're working with this stuff, always have a mask or respirator on. Pretty prevalent these days. I'm not using one just so I can verbally communicate to you all a little bit better. You can see the dust particles flying around here in my makeshift shop. Okay, what I'm looking for is this type of finish. Okay, I will see if I can get it to focus on both of these cameras. This type of finish is what I'm looking for. Okay, nice and smooth. Okay, while I'm sanding on this stuff, I'm always trying to be aware that things are nice and square and true. Okay, I'm always having this thing handy on my bench pen or next to it to always be checking to make sure that things are staying where they need to stay. Okay, so now that we have one reference edge, as I would like to call it, okay, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to measure out 1 3/4. Okay, 1 3/4 is the finished size of our blocks. Okay, I have a ruler here. Here we go. Okay, I'm just going to do the old 1 3/4 on each side and draw a straight line. So 1 3/4, just a nice mark here, and 1 3/4 down here. Okay. Straight edge of some kind. It doesn't necessarily have to be this or anything else, right? And a nice clean line to connect the two. Okay, be conscious with your lines in your mark making so you don't make a huge gnarly mess. Okay, now I have this line on my face here. I'm gonna always try to cut outside of that line. Okay, because I am gonna cut this material. It's gonna be a relatively clean cut, but it's not gonna be perfect. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to give myself just a little bit of space there to sand into that line quickly, and then I know it's perfect. Okay, other things I'm going to do is I'm going to dress in this end and this end that I wish I hadn't just hacked away. So I'm going to tune that up a little bit here first, and I'll show you why. So give me 1 second. Okay, I want something relatively square here, so I want to make sure that's relatively square. So I'm gonna I just did a quick cut, and I'll do a quick sand on that. Just something that's close at this point. We're gonna dress this up and tune this up here in a little bit. Okay. The reason I'm going to do that is I'm going to take my square and I'm going to run these lines down on these edges also. Okay? So I'm running those lines down as well. Now I can run it all the way to the back side, but with these 3 reference points, I should be okay. Okay, I'm going to spend most of this demonstration looking for the cap, so we'll just throw that down. All right. The reason I do those lines, okay, when I go to cut this, I want that that blade on the left-hand side of this, okay? So I know I can keep it vertical and I can keep it horizontal, and now I have two ways to line this up. So I can make damn sure that I'm not going to be cutting into my material, all right? I have this nice big bench pin here, something I haven't talked about yet. This is one that I've made. I actually made this right before this video because it needed to be a little bit different for this style of work, okay? It's an elevated bench pin, which means it's comfortable for me to stand and work at, which is great. It's got a wider surface and a longer base. It's got these two different V's, and it's got this back bevel cut. That lets me come in here and use a saw in certain areas. That lets me support this material really well to get in here and sand the edges. And you'll see me working on this throughout, okay? It is nearly impossible, in my opinion, to do a good job on any project without this type of surface to work on, okay? You can do a lower one if you prefer sitting. Sometimes with standing, I feel like you can get fatigued if you're bent over so much working on something, so that's why I raised this to an elevated status, okay? So I have this line down, I have this line across, and I have this line back. I'm going to take my back saw here. I'm going to start it right across the top. Okay. I'm just carefully starting this, okay? It is far easier for me to cut this a little big than it is for me to start over, okay? I can cut it a little bit big, not screw it up, and easily sand into that line, okay? So right now I'm just doing a simple cut on either end. I'm gonna then let my saw follow into those lines, and I'm gonna use my thumb here as a guide, being cautious of the blade, just to score this line across the top surface, okay? I'm going to work that across, and then I'm going to work it down, watching my position. I'm going to come back, and I know that that line's there. I can actually see a reflection in my screen, which helps. Okay, and I've got this position outside of my bench pin to where I can cut it. Okay, great. So this is the surface we've got with our piece. Okay, so it's got a nice, relatively nice cut surface. All right. What I can do then now, by judging that line, the one reason it's really great to have this line all the way crossed, now that I've said you don't have to worry about it, is because it gives me a reference on this back edge. Okay? So if I would have transferred it, which I will now, I can see that I got a little close here. Okay? Be cautious of the size of the pen or pencil or whatever marker you're using. The tip can add thickness and dimension, and it can end up causing a serious issue with adjusting certain things. Okay, the way that I typically use is I use the smallest fine point marker I can get, and I make as little marks as I have to, because the goal is to sand this thing smooth, and I don't want to end up with those marks on here. Okay. Essentially what I got is I got my starting surface and I got my factory surfaces on both sides, okay? It's 2 inches thick by roughly 1 3/4 plus, okay? What I'm gonna do first then is I'm gonna take this thing down to dimension this way, okay? So I'm gonna make sure it's parallel in one direction, and I can do that quickly by just sanding this surface, okay? As I'm sanding this surface, I'm gonna keep rotating it. Okay, I'm going to take it and do it in a vertical position. Right? The reason that I'm going to keep moving stuff around is your body naturally has a tendency to roll stuff over or move or work in a round fashion. You're trying to make your body work like a machine, so it needs to go straight back and forth, okay? Inherently, that's impossible, so you just have to start feeling what's comfortable to you and start adjusting it, and you will figure out what works. This is how I do it. It's just what works for me. Okay? So I'm sneaking up on those lines. I'm watching them here on the top. I'm watching it here on the end, on the adjacent side. Okay? Creating a nice film of blue foam dust on everything. Okay? I'm going to get this about 95, 98%. Okay? Because I know I can come back in and I can work on this when it's a smaller object pretty easily. Okay, I do have blocks like this in my shop, okay, and they're nice for doing larger scale stuff. The issue is, you know, for this it's kind of nice, but it gets kind of clunky, and you can end up, you know, these are weighted, they have a little bit more aggression to them, and you can end up really digging into your material and taking off a little too much too fast, okay? This is just plastic. You can find it pretty much anywhere. You could use a piece of wood, anything, and you can cut them to sizes and shapes that you want to. The nice thing about plastic, which I'll talk about in a later video, is you can bend it, right? You can bend it to a specific shape, stick some sandpaper on it, and then now it can be utilized as a different tool, okay? So I have my new surfaces and my old surface that I started with, relatively as clean as they need to be here, okay? So I'm talking, you know, 95% or so, okay? So I am roughly 1 3/4 inch thick by 2 inches wide by, I don't know, this is probably 10 inches long or so. The length at this point doesn't matter as long as I'm over, you know, obviously 6 inches, all right? So the next thing I need to do is I need to bring this down the next dimension, okay? Now, I'm going to pick my cleanest face, which is this factory face, and I'm actually going to take some sandpaper to it. Depending on your blue foam, pink foam that you can get, Owens Corning is pink, DAP is blue. They both shape relatively the same. Okay? Industrial designers are partial to blue for some reason. Okay. One thing I haven't been doing enough of is checking to maintain square. Okay, and I haven't done a great job of it, it looks like. Okay, I don't know if you can see this, but I have a tendency to roll this side here. Okay, so what that's telling me is I got a little high spot here and I got a low spot there. Right, so I could actually, in some cases, I can take my square and I can almost press this in here, and you can see where it's hitting here and it's not hitting there. So that tells me I need to bring this material in a little bit on this bottom side. I'm working that area that I need to bring, and then I'm working the whole surface, okay? And then we'll check again. This can be, you know, a tedious process, but it has to be done this way to maintain everything staying nice and true and square. Okay? Check the original side. It looks good. Our factory side looks like we could kind of work on it a little bit. Okay? If you don't maintain square, this one needs to be square to this one, and this one needs to be square to this one, and this one needs to be square to that one, and so on and so forth, right? So if this one's off, it's going to make this one off, and then it's going to make this one off, and then you see what happens, right? It just chases and chases and chases. So just light passes, work into it, don't get in a hurry. Okay. Nice and flat surfaces, nice and true. Okay. The more patience I have at this step, it's going to save me time on the next step. Okay, so don't get in a hurry. Okay, so now we have essentially 3 faces that are beautiful, that we're willing to use for the next step. That's telling me this face is going to get cut off. Okay, so I'm going to take my ruler again and my marker. going to come over and I'm going to mark 1 3/4. 1 3/4. 1 3/4. Now, depending on how good you are, right? This is square, so I can use this. But you can take your 2 fingers here, rest it on that surface, put your marker on your dot, and come right across this edge like this. Okay? You see how that lines that up perfectly. And I can do that down the end, down this other face. This takes practice. I mean, you can easily just draw it with a ruler too. If I do it right, everything lines up. Okay? It's just a little trick that'll speed things up. Okay? It takes a lot of kind of grip and focus to do that, but it's a step that can speed things up. Okay? Next thing is, I'm going to cut this section off. Watch where your hands are. That's not fun. This one got a little weird on me. And then I can bring this across the top carefully. So the saw will tend to follow those guidelines, okay? And you know, you can cut into your Benchman. That's what it's there for. It's a useful surface, but it can be kind of sacrificed in some ways. I left a little bit of extra here, which is good. A little bit, a little bit, a little bit. Okay. So now we're going to dress that in. I'm going to speed this up with a little 120. So I can work this way. I can hold this and work this way. The Benchman acts as a solid work surface, okay? If I'm up here sanding, there's flex here, right? So I'm not being as accurate, okay? I can, in fact, turn this if I want to and use my Benchman here to help hold the actual sanding block in some cases. And then I can hold the blue foam and sand on it this way, which is a nice added feature also. I'm always going to remember to keep turning and rotating my block so I don't eat too much of this off in a certain way. Okay, I'm going to be checking for square always. Okay, I'm going to be checking for square. Also going to be checking for dimension. Okay, so this is still big, still a little big, almost there. Okay, so we're looking pretty good. Let's switch to 180. So I happen to have a 180 here. Whenever you can work something the whole surface, you're going to have the best finish. Okay, doing this with this block is great. I can do it this way. I can also do it this way. Okay. All right, so now we have what I'd consider 2 faces, so 2 adjacent faces that are perfect, and 2 edges. Okay, so we have face, face, edge, edge. Now we want to address at least one end. Okay, this end looks relatively good. Okay, it's got a big chunker out of it, so we'll skip it. Okay, so we'll come over here to this end. And what we're going to do is we're going to check for square. It's not quite square. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this. It's close enough I can just sand it in rather than having to cut it. So that's a benefit. Okay. All right, let's sand that in quick. Okay, be aware of your surfaces. Okay, keep things clean. If I got a bunch of junk on here and I set this on here, it could press into my surface. Okay, that's why I'm still at about 98% finished, right? Because I want that last little bit of sanding to take out all those minor imperfections. But if I roll this on a corner or hit it here or drop it or throw it in my school bag, it's going to be dinged, dented, and look like crap. Okay, blue foam is a great modeling medium, but it dents if you look at it wrong. Okay. So it's starting to come square, but what's happening is it's getting a kind of a dome shape to it, all right, which is something I need to be careful of. Okay, I can use my square to kind of do that trick where it can give me some indentations a little bit, but I just need to maybe work it instead of going in long strokes where I have a tendency to round things over. I'll just kind of tighten up my stroke length here so that I can make sure that I'm not rounding this over. And my goal isn't necessarily having to hit that line perfect. It's making sure that my end is square. Okay, and that's looking pretty dang good. Okay, I'm going to check it from all directions. Okay, to make sure everything is beautiful. All right, and that essentially, tune this up just a little bit more. Is phase one. Okay, so that's phase one of the process. Okay, the reason we do this is because then we can start and dissect this into 1, 2, 3 cubes. We can turn one cube into our perfect final cube. The secondary one we can go into a pyramid, and the third one we can do into a sphere. All right, we're going to start with phase 2 of this. So we're going to take our initial block, okay, and we're going to dissect it into 3 pieces. All right, we're going from our first edge here. I'm going to come over my 1 3/4, okay, my magic number with this project. Okay, 1 3/4. I'm going to make a dot. Okay. Nice thing is about now is we have a square object relatively. It's a rectangle, but it's square. Okay. So I can make sure that because it's square, I can use a square, okay, to make some lines on this. Okay. So I'm going to transfer these lines down and around. Whoa. Wear a mask, kids. You'll end up like me. Go. Transferring this around. This is magical. Okay, now we're going to dissect one off at a time. Okay, we don't want to take too many off at a time because we want to make sure we're doing one, dressing it both faces. Moving on to the next one. I'll explain. So I'm going to hold this up over my bench pin. I'm going to come to the left-hand side of the mark. I'm going to go across the face, a little score. I'm going to go across this face with a little score. I'm going to go across the next face with a little score, and the final face with a little score. Okay. The cleaner I cut this, the more time it's going to save me with the other steps. Okay. So now I have some guides to help my saw follow. Okay. Nice and soft. Okay, I did that over my bench pin, so my little guy, this is my little guy, didn't fall on the floor. Okay. So now I need to spend a minute and tidy up that last square, or that last edge. I'm getting small enough now that I can flip these two around. I can start working this surface. You see me doing this kind of like twisting motion. Okay, that's to ensure I'm getting the whole even surface. All right. I'm still not looking for perfection yet, but I'm getting close. Right. Okay. I'm going to take my square. I'm going to check all four sides. It's absolutely perfect. Duh, of course. Okay. I got a little spot I need to address. I'll bring it in. Spoke too soon about being perfect. This is like Fabergé egg quality now, okay? Like I need to baby this thing and treat it like it's my own, okay? I do not want to take too much aggression towards this because it could dent and ding. I don't want to squeeze it too hard. It could dent and ding, okay? So if I have a little issue, I want to take just a minor pass on it and check it again, okay? If I take too much off of this surface, it's going to make me wrong with the next surface, and then it could make me wrong with the next surface and the next surface, and you just keep until you end up with nothing, okay? You end up with just a little tiny box, okay? Which is not the goal, right? So I now have one beautiful cube that's pretty dang close, okay? I'm bringing this guy back, or gal, okay? Guy or gal. It's blue, but I mean, I'm not a blue and pink kind of guy. So I still have my four faces, okay? Face, face, edge, edge, good. I have this rough cut here. So what I'm gonna do is, again, with my square, I'm gonna give myself reference, 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 and you guessed it, reference. All right, sand it in, rotating around. I'm actually going to hit it with something a little more aggressive. Typically, I would have this type of stuff. I would have maybe a 180 on one face, and I could even do a 120 or an 80 grit on the back face, right? So if I need to hit something a little more aggressively, I can switch this and hit it aggressively and come back, right? I just haven't gotten those stuck on here, so I'm using this little different style here. Okay, we're gonna get that nice and clean. I'm going to twist and check for square. I am perfect and beautiful. Well, this is. I am obviously not perfect and beautiful. Maybe I'm beautiful. I don't know. 1 3/4, if you can guess it. Make a dot. Grab our square again and transfer this line all the way around. Okay. If it's square, your line will meet up, which, duh, mine did. Okay. And we're going to do this again. And that's where we want to end up for phase 2. Okay, so phase 1, we had our long rectangular shape. You can see I have extra. This is what I'd like to call my whoopsie block. And it just so happens to be just big enough to make 2 more. I can screw up twice more, okay, and have this, okay? That's important to have. It works as a handle, and it also gives you a little bit of a safety net, okay? What I want here is I want 3 blocks that are uniform, well sanded, and ready to go on to the next step. Okay, we need to start phase 3, okay? Which means we find our most beautiful baby here, the one we love the most and has the most potential to be sanded in perfectly to a cube, okay? We're going to take it, we're going to stick it out of the way, okay? We're going to take one of our next 2. It doesn't necessarily matter. We're going to be removing essentially 5 sides. Which seems weird, but it is 5 sides, okay? The other one is going to be turned into a sphere, which means it all goes away, essentially, okay? So I have cube number 2, okay? Cube number 2 is going to turn into a pyramid shape, okay? Triangle from all sides, all right? Essentially what I want to make sure of this at this point is this is turned into 1 3/4. Okay, so I'm double checking it not only for square, but for size here. And I'm a little bit oversized, so I'm going to tune this in. I find when these get small like this, it's an easier method to pull, lightly push. What you don't want to do is roll these things, okay? If my sanding block was just slightly wider, I would get away with not having to do this little twist method, but it helps me assure that I'm getting the whole surface, and it helps it stay more, excuse me, uniform, okay? I want to make sure that I'm not taking too much material, but I am staying at 1 3/4. Okay, this has also got measurements on it, and I've kind of set it to the point where when I slide this up here, I can check for square and also check for size, so I know kind of which sides need to come off more. Okay, and frankly, you guys can't double check how correct these are. They just got to look good for TV. Okay, so I have my cube. Okay, it's square, it's ready to rock and roll. Okay, what I need to do next is I'm going to put some transfer lines on this. All right, essentially a pyramid shape, right? It's all corners converging to one point at the top. All right, so I'm going to try to find center on the top. Easiest way to do that is go from X to X, essentially. Excuse me. Wear your masks. Okay, so I'm going to find X at the top here. I'm going to find X that way. Okay, so I have an X in the top, so I know exactly where that space is. All right, I'm going to transfer that to my ends on 2 sides. So using this square, I'm going to transfer that to an end. Okay, so what they'll end up being is you're finding center that way and splitting it across. Okay, I'm going to transfer that line to the ends. Okay, and then what I'm going to need to do is basically draw a straight line from here to here, and on the other side as well.
First one. There's my second one. You can see this as I'm rotating my object, right? Keep your body position and your hands working the exact same way on everything. Move your object, okay? It is inefficient and inaccurate to keep moving your body position, right? Try to think of yourself as a machine again, right? How can I repeat these
movements? Okay, we have triangle and a triangle. We're only putting them on two ends because we're going to chop and chop, and those two pieces go away, right? So it doesn't make any sense for me to write on those sides. Now we're going to saw this. Okay. Now, you see this? This is tiny, right? Which tiny means dangerous. This is not tiny nor dangerous. I mean, this is not tiny but is dangerous. Okay. Just going to be a little more cautious with my hand placement. Just like chopping an onion, roll your fingers back. Okay. Hold it there. Score across the surface face. Make sure you're cutting on the outside of the line. Okay. I'm going to score this around. Okay. Trying to get close to that line, but making sure that I don't come anywhere near it with this, right? Because this can chew this up and then I'm screwed, right? I want to make sure I'm maintaining a nice clean surface. That little score is just going to help my blade guide. Okay, whenever you can, cut 90 degrees. Don't try to cut at an angle. It's really challenging. Okay, completely supported. I'm essentially just letting the weight of the saw push. I'm not putting a lot of force on this. Okay, you get a nice clean cut. Before, oh my God, I'm dying. Before I lose this extra little handle, I'm gonna hit this quick with some sandpaper. Okay, because I have this extra little chunk. Okay, we're gonna do the exact same to the other side. So okay, this gets a little trickier because the only way I can check for square here is from the side. Okay, so I can check square here for now, right? But everywhere else it's just an angle, right? So you need to make sure that you still can kind of see your reference top line here. Okay, and I can also make sure that I kept that reference center line. Okay, that's going to help us do our next cuts. Right. So I've gotten this shaped relatively close. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this on its side and I'm going to kind of nest it in my hand. I'm going to go from that center point on these now longer faces that I cut, the other objects. And I'm going to bring that down straight. And I just chunked a corner off, which is frustrating. So I'll have to fix that as much as I can. That's what's hard with glue foam, right? You look at it wrong and it just chunks it off. Okay, my marker is basically dead at this point, but it's working as a nice little marker because it's giving almost like a little scored area. Really kind of tricky to cut these at this point. What's going to end up happening is it's going to be not a beautiful cut, but it just has to get me close. Okay, these ones you have to cut at an angle. Okay, which gets to be kind of trickier. Except the nice part is you can see both of the lines because of the shape of this object. Gets to be a little bit of an optical illusion. Okay. One tool I haven't really brought into the mix yet is this little multifile. Okay, you can see this. It's got a file and a rasp. Okay, a rasp is just kind of more aggressive toothed metal object that can kind of really aggressively take away a lot of material fast. A file is going to be like a really aggressive piece of sandpaper, so it's going to be able to chew this material away quick. Flat surfaces are for flat surfaces, duh, or convex surfaces. So the outside of like the top of a rainbow, right? Where the curved side is going to do the inside of the rainbow, or the concave side, okay? So if I'm doing any sort of shaping in the round, I want to use the curved side. So what this is going to do is it's going to help me remove more material faster, but I need to be really extra cautious I don't take too much. I find with blue foam, typically you work with a file pushing it away from you. That's when it's most aggressive. But I find it almost works better in some cases to just pull. Okay, and again, I'm just doing this to save myself a little bit of time. You see, once again, I've left that little tail on there to give myself a little bit more room. I'm going to use the edge of my bench pin here as a support, watching my lines. I can even lay this down and pull. And it's really coming into shape pretty quickly here for me. Okay, I'm just going to where I'm starting to kiss those layout lines. Okay, I'm not going past them just quite yet. Just want to get that to a relatively smooth surface. You can see I still have a flat spot here. I need to work that in, but I'm not quite there yet. Okay, I'm going to cut this other side. Let's get real close. Okay, and here's what we got so far. Okay, what I want to make sure is I'm not going to take this thing out of square from the bottom perspective. So I'm going to make sure I'm checking the bottom. I got this big gnarly chunk out of the corner that I'm going to have to hide somehow because I rushed it. Okay, I can hold this in my hand. I can use my bench pin almost like a little place to rest, right? So I'm not up here in no man's land sanding. I can actually just come in here and start lightly smooching each one of these sides, giving them the love they deserve. Okay. I can come back to this position where I can lightly just pull and turn and pull. Okay, what I'm trying to do is work this entire thing down to a perfect pyramid. Okay, so there's no flat spots, there's no ununiformity. That's a word. Uniformity? Ununiformity is a new word. I'm going to call Webster's. We'll get that in there. literally 180 grit sandpaper. I'm going to work this in, and where I'll probably go from here is I could go to my 220 grit sanding block, pile of creativity back here, pile of creativity. That's what that the messy shop's called. Okay. 220 is going to give this like a buttery, smooth surface. Okay, it's going to look delicious, but don't eat it. It's not as delicious as it looks. Don't forget about your bottom. And there we go. Okay, that's about as far as I need to take it for this. I still have a little bit of black from my line here. I just need to nicely come in with. Okay, but essentially there's what we need to end up with for our pyramid. Okay, 1 3/4 of an inch tall, 1 3/4 by 1 3/4 wide and deep, or however you're holding that object. Okay, so now where we're ending up is with our cube and our pyramid. Okay, so that ends phase 3. Let's do the final phase. Okay, phase 4. Is that the final phase? I hope so. It's creating a sphere. Right, probably the most challenging one, just because of how challenging it is to get something as perfectly round as you possibly can. Okay, we have our cube, we have our pyramid. Okay, we're going to set those off to the side here, and we're going to grab our third remaining cube. Okay, now there's a couple different ways to turn this into a sphere. All right, I've done it in the past where I've turned it into a cylinder first and then taken those extra edges in. What I want to do with this one is I'm going to do something where you basically draw a circle on each face, cut the corners off, okay, and then you start working this thing down into a cube, or a sphere shape from a cube. Okay, so circle guide, something I haven't shown you guys yet or talked about for this, may or may not be familiar. Really great for modeling. Okay, you're going to need something like this to really help you maintain perfectness with this. Okay, getting our 1 3/4. Okay, I can take these reference lines, and I can essentially, since this cube is the same size as the circle, I can just kind of line this up as close to the edges as possible. Okay, so I'm going to go through, and I'm going to do that to all 6 sides. Okay, so there we have it. We got all 6 sides. Wow, math is hard for me today. Okay, what I want to do is make sure that I know exactly where my rough center is for each one of these cubes. Okay, basically what we're going to do is we're going to start taking the corners in, and we're going to make something that looks like a rounded cube. All right, and then we're going to take those in a little bit more, and we're going to take them in a little bit more. Okay, essentially working this thing into something that looks like kind of like a lumpy meatball, and then we're going to start shaping it into our roundness. Okay, don't really need to do a ton of cutting on this to start, but I will use more of my shaping. Okay, so I'm just going to roughly find center of these blocks by going from my high point. Okay, I'm just using my finger again to transfer this. Not super critical that it's precise, but I want it to be as close as I can. Okay, these are going to be kind of my reference lines to know exactly where to stop. Okay? So those can easily be drawn just by kind of using your finger again to guide across the surface. Right? So they basically just look like X's, essentially. X's or pluses, maybe? Here we go. Plus or X, depending on how you turn it. I'm going to use my rasp tool again, and we're going to just start removing these corners. Okay? So I'm going to kind of angle this to a point where I'm watching this face. Doing more of a pull method. You'll find with some of these blue foam sheets that they almost have a grain direction to them, like a wood would be. A wood would be. And, you know, pushing and pulling, sometimes it'll take a huge chunk out, right? And then you're screwed. So what I like to do is just pull and be really cautious, okay? So by doing a higher angle, I can see that line right from on top. Okay? So working each one of these in. Switch sides. Nice thing is every time you switch it, you've already got kind of one almost complete from the other edge. Okay. Now here's what we're getting. Okay. Now we're going into no man's land, right? I have to start trusting my eye and trusting my hand to know kind of what that shape's going to be, right? I could take this into a cylinder now and then I have 50% of it done, right? Or I can just keep working this thing down. So I'm going to choose to just keep working this thing down, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go past my lines a little bit on each face, but I'm going to try to keep kind of shrinking that circle on this face, right? I mean, essentially I could draw a series of circles, concentric circles all the way through and keep breaking them down to it, but after a while you just got to kind of go for it and start trusting that you're not going to go too far, right? I have a lot of material to remove at this point, and that's good, right? But it's also intimidating because it's like, oh, I'm going to go to town on this and remove a ton of material. But then you could go too far pretty quick. So you still kind of have to be cautious. Oh, Lucy finally showed up to work today. Thanks, Luce. Been gone all day. She's going to come join us. Okay, essentially what I'm doing is I'm just rounding this entire cube up. Okay, so I'm just going to essentially hit fast forward, boop, and get this as close to a meatball as possible. All right, essentially we're at meatball stage, okay? And you probably saw me, I was kind of starting to work in that direction, okay? This is the next phase of making the sphere, right? Is a combination between a hard surface and a rotating ball. So I'm kind of rotating the two pieces at once, trying to build that sphere. And I'm essentially taking down the corners, right? The lumpiness. I'm working out that lumpiness, but I'm keeping this thing moving at all times. I have no references and no guidelines at this point. It's just eye and feel. Okay, I can take it to my circle guide, and I can find 1 3/4, and I can use it to kind of throw some little guide marks in there to see how round I'm getting. Essentially, it should fit perfectly through there. So that's essentially what our next step is. Okay, we're ready to finally take the meatball to a sphere. Lucy's here. She's going to make sure that I don't go too far, and I stop when it's just right. Got it, Luce? Got it. Okay, lumpy meatball. All right, lumpy meatball needs to be babied, but we can be a little bit aggressive. Okay, I'm just going to start working down all these little lumps and bumps and areas. Okay. Checking back with my circle guide. I can actually slide this in here in some spots and use that circle guide as a kind of a reference. It's going to put a little bit of a crease line in a few areas of here. It's going to help give me some indication of, like how far do I still yet have to go. Okay. It's getting better. The closer I get to a sphere, the more I'm going to round that surface. Okay. So I'm working this tool over the top, keeping it moving. Here's where you can switch to loose sandpaper. Okay, your hand has a natural curve to it. It's got a natural softness. A nice piece of sandpaper can be kind of flexible in that surface, and you're going to kind of over the top of this, right? So this is the movement in this hand, rotating it, and this is the movement here. You can do this where you're just kind of pulling it across the surface. It's going to really start to take away a lot of those ridges and bumps. Okay. About lost it. So now I'm getting something that's starting to look like a relatively nice sphere. This is where you're going to have to start trusting your vision on this, okay? You're going to have to look at a spot and say, that looks a little square-ish. I'm going to hit that just a hair, okay? And then rotate it to hit a little bit more, Okay, you don't want to do too much in an area because it could go from square or from sphere to egg, or you could have a flat spot. Okay, that's why this shape is so challenging, right? Is you have to make sure you're constantly rolling and evolving it. Okay, it's kind of easy to throw it out of your hands, so you want to be cautious. You're not going to do so. Not looking too bad. Incredibly challenging shape to do by hand, right? There's other ways to model spheres by using balls, something the right size, um, mechanized equipment, that kind of stuff. So this kind of thing, it's just more of a trial, right? To see if you're able or capable of doing this kind of thing. So, not ultimately practical, but a good exercise in working with blue foam and understanding how to use tools. Ah. So I'm doing this where I'm kind of rolling it in one axis and going around. Okay, so almost turning it into more of a wheel. And then I'm going to move my fingers to a different axis point and rotate it around. Okay, so that's helping me get a little bit more roundness to it. You get pretty ambidextrous the more you do this stuff, because you realize that you're moving both parts and pieces. Okay? You're moving the tool and you're moving the object, and you're hoping to keep your hand steady. You've probably seen me, I'm resting my elbow on this, right? It's easier than me kind of up here. Now, I will hold this up here, hold it up to a light source to start seeing some surface detail. Quite often when I get close to this shape, but it's so much easier to rest a hand on a surface. It's just a little bit of a reference just to kind of lay it in there and see. I have kind of a white table surface here, but I have a blue backdrop behind here, so putting it up against like a dark thing with some light kind of raking across the surface is going to help me kind of see where my highs and lows are. And I got to tell you, this one I struggle at, right? It's a challenge. And if you can make something that appears halfway round from, I don't know, arm distance away, you've nailed it, right? I mean, from here, the eye is trained to see imperfections in a circle. It's no different than asking someone to draw a circle that's perfect, right? It's almost impossible. Okay, so getting this precise is going to be a real task, and I welcome you to put yourself up to that task to make it as beautiful and perfect as you possibly can. But understand that there will be some imperfections here. Okay. Lumpiness is not great, but it's better than if you got a big chunk missing or something like that. Okay. Be nice if you could just roll it in your hand like Play-Doh, right? And then it's perfect, right? For the sake of time, and not spending 2 hours on this video making this perfect, I'm going to call it good, okay? So there's where you want to end up, right? As nice as you possibly can, okay? That ends this phase, phase 5, of this demonstration. The last phase, we'll just talk about how to display this. Okay, the final phase, the final countdown, as we would call it, okay? You've spent all this time making a beautiful cube, beautiful pyramid, and a beautiful sphere. How do you display it, okay? What I've found, it's nice to just take a nice piece of clean white or black. Black would be nice. I have white. I think Lucy used all the black. It's fine. To mount this to. Okay, so you have a nice display piece. It can be judged and appreciated for a lifetime. Okay, so how are we going to use this? Okay, this piece is 3 inches wide. Okay, 3 inches wide by 9 inches long. Okay, what I want to do is first, I want to split that in half. So half of 9 is 4.5. Okay, that's essentially my center point for my middle form. And I'm going to just make a small mark here, one that the object's going to cover. Okay, so nothing too crazy. Now what I want to do is I'm going to split that dimension. Okay, I'm going to do that twice. Half of 4.5 is 2.25. I'm going to do that on both sides. 2.25, 2.25. Again, small mark. Use my bench pen to my advantage here if I can get it laid the right way. Again, using the square. Nice light pencil mark. Nice light pencil mark. Okay. I'm going to come this direction, and I'm going to find the half a point of 3, which is 1.5. I'm going to do that on all 3 of these. Okay. Now I have roughly my center point for all 3 of these. Cube, I like to display these in the way I made them as I would read them. So cube goes on my left. Okay. Pyramid would go in the center. And sphere, Lucy, what did you do with the sphere? Did you take it? Lucy, got the sphere. I literally lost the sphere. One memento. This is not a toy. This is art and design, not a toy. I think I dropped it, but I can blame it on her. Sphere. Okay, it's going to go right there. It's a nice display. We got a little bit of white around it. You can kind of see the progression. Doesn't matter. Order really doesn't matter to me. It's just, it will work great. What we would do in this case, there's a couple different methods. Okay, we could use a simple push pin and push it up from underneath, set the object down on it. That's going to be most effective. Okay, we could use a little dollop of adhesive, line this up, as straight and true as possible as we can, stick that on there. Okay, the one you'll have a little bit of a trick with, which is nice that you got the pin in there as well. Take this and just make an ever so small flat spot on it, little dab of glue right into that push pin, and it's going to hold it in place. So we'd have a nice 3-inch by 9-inch white mat board display showcasing our final objects. There you have it. Okay, we have our 3 objects. We have our 3 marks. Okay. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to find a hammer. Hammer. Okay. I'm going to take these little tacks I have. So you can use a push pin, thumbtack, anything, right? Something small with a small head on the bottom so it doesn't really obstruct too much. And we're going to go from there. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these. I'm going to line it up on that center point. Somehow hold it. Forceps. My medical student days. Okay. basically what I'm trying to do here is just poke that hole through so it gives me a location on the backside. Okay, right, loose. Okay. Got it? Okay. Now, on the bottom or worst face of my cube, I'm going to essentially take and find center. You can make the noises if you like. I find it helps. Okay. Nail through the back face of this. Find a space on your bench pin with a void and tap that through. Okay. I'm going to do that for all three of my nails. Tap. Magical. Forceps, Lucy. Got that. This way's nice because you literally just have to find center of the object, right? You don't have to draw a big line. You don't have to make a big fuss. You don't have to get all freaked out, okay? So we have those three nails in there. You can kind of see it, okay? I have my cube with the X on there. I'm just going to basically line those up and press, okay? And rotate that to position. Let's do the same for our triangle. Now, I'm second guessing this. It's like, should this one go here or here? It doesn't really matter. So let's get it to center. Bop, bop. Bop is a typical center line finding noise. Wondering. Press. Okay. And then that little tiny flat spot. So we can just, how about a piece of sandpaper right here? Just a little tiny sanding flat spot. This is for, a little added adhesive. I'm just using the nail at this point. I'd come back and add the adhesive. And press that on there. And voila. Okay. We have our final display of our three objects. Okay. I can come in here and I can write my John Hancock on here. I can give it my deal and my 2021, and now it's mine forever. Okay. And I got the experience of going through and understanding these shapes. Okay. Why are these shapes important? Okay. Any design that you're going to make out of blue foam is going to utilize the principles we've done in these simple shapes. Okay. You're going to be able to understand how to make a flat surface, how to make a 90-degree corner. Okay. How to come to a point or have a crisp edge if you need it. How to make a rounded shape. Okay. These are the most basic forms that you're going to be able to utilize in small scale and large scale blue foam modeling. Okay, so not only do you have a cool piece here, but you have the knowledge and understanding of how to take these forms and the skills and the tools you've utilized with this project to now form it into much more difficult shapes.